Welcome to the TEA Child Find Evaluation and Art Supports Network training session regarding federal and state regulations pertaining to referrals for initial evaluation and guidance for local education agencies, or LEAs, to consider when establishing procedures for receiving referrals for special education evaluation. Please note that this presentation is copyrighted by the Texas Education Agency. If you have any questions or need any further information, please contact copyrights@tea.texas.gov. The Office of Special Populations and Monitoring at the Texas Education Agency has adopted a True North statement to exemplify their promise to the students with disabilities and their parents and families in Texas. Together, we are committed to high expectations and strong systems that achieve equitable outcomes for every student with a disability. This presentation is an expansion of the Referral for Initial Evaluation Quick Guide document, which highlights the key points and important resources for local education agencies to consider when developing their operating procedures for receiving referrals and requests for initial special education evaluations. This document serves as a quick reference guide and can be accessed on the TEA Child Find Evaluation and Art Supports Network website. Additionally, this flowchart, Special Education Initial Referral Timeline, provides an overview of the timeline and legal requirements for a referral for an initial special education evaluation, and may be another helpful resource for ensuring timelines and legal requirements are implemented. This valuable tool can be accessed on the TEA Child Find Evaluation and Art Supports Network website, which is included in the Resources section at the end of this module. Today, we will cover in detail the legal requirements and responsibilities of a local education agency, in other words, a public district or charter school, for responding to a parent written request for evaluation based on the federal and state rules and regulations regarding a referral for a full and individual initial evaluation, or FIIE, as well as best practice for addressing parent verbal requests and staff or campus referrals for evaluation. We will also explore important questions for your LEA to consider when creating or updating your procedures for receiving a referral for an initial special education evaluation. By the end of this session, you will have an understanding of the legal timelines and requirements for responding to requests for evaluation and the importance of clearly written procedures for receiving initial referral requests from staff and parents. Let us take a look at what is legally required and the responsibilities of LEAs when presented with a referral or request for an FIIE. The LEA's child find duty to seek parental consent to evaluate a child suspected of having a disability and needing special education services is an affirmative one. Affirmative means LEAs are responsible to actively engage in the child find process. A parent is not required to initiate that process. However, a parent can request an initial evaluation at any time. We're going to explore state and federal regulations to illustrate what is legally required regarding initial referrals for special education and the importance placed on notifying families of the process for initial referral requests. Let's begin with the LEA's responsibilities related to annual notification to parents and families. First, according to the Texas Education Code, Statute 26.0081, right to information concerning special education and education of students with learning difficulties, TEA must develop and provide LEAs with a written explanation of the options and requirements for providing assistance to students who have learning difficulties or who may need special education services. This must state that a parent may request an evaluation for special education or Section 504 services at any time and provide who is the designated contact person regarding options for a student experiencing learning difficulties or regarding a referral for evaluation for special education or Section 504 services. Every school year, the LEA must distribute this clearly written explanation to the parent of each student. LEAs may include the statement in the student handbook, or a school may disseminate the statement through other means, such as a letter or newsletter, to each parent and ensure that each parent receives a copy. The link to the TEA developed statement can be found in the resources section at the end of this presentation. In addition to the Right to Information statement, during the 2019-2020 school year, each LEA was required to distribute the notice to families, to parents or families of every enrolled student. This notice includes the legal rights of a child regarding the provision of special education services. Changes made from 2016 to 2017 in reporting requirements for LEAs regarding special education enrollment, the process and procedures for initiating a referral for evaluation for special education under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, or IDEA, and the Texas Education Code, Section 29.004, and where to find local policies and procedures related to initiating a referral for evaluation under IDEA. Although this is no longer a required annual notification, districts and charter schools need to have a notice to families available in case anyone asks for a copy. The link to the TEA developed notice can be found in the resources section of this presentation. Now let's take a look at state regulations regarding an initial referral. The Texas Administrative Code states that LEAs must have a referral system as part of general education that includes the referral of students for an FIIE. This statute also conveys that students who struggle in the general education setting should be considered for all supports and services available to all students before being referred for a special education evaluation. Please note that consider does not equate to a mandate to engage all students in an intervention process prior to referral. State regulations further note that if a student continues to experience difficulty in the general education classroom after being provided interventions, often referred to as response to intervention or RTI, or multi-tiered systems of support or MTSS, that the LEA must refer the student for an initial evaluation for special education services. It is important to remember, and we want to emphasize, that intervention systems like RTI or MTSS cannot be used to deny or delay a student's referral for an evaluation. If a student is suspected of having an educational disability condition that requires special education services, the LEA should move forward with an initial evaluation while simultaneously providing interventions to the student while the evaluation is being conducted. Federal and state regulations surrounding a referral for special education evaluation states that anyone can initiate a request for an FIIE. Remember, child find is everyone's responsibility. Furthermore, if a student is suspected to have dyslexia and/or a related disorder and a need for special education services, LEAs must refer the student for an initial evaluation. It is important to remember that this applies to students currently receiving dyslexia services through Section 504 that do not make adequate progress and data indicates they may need specially designed instruction. The referral should not be delayed because the student is receiving services through Section 504, and these services should continue while the special education evaluation is being completed. An important component of an LEA's procedure for referral for possible special education services is the process for responding to a parent or staff request for an initial referral. When a parent submits a request for an evaluation in writing to the LEA's Director of Special Education or District Administrative Employee, the LEA must respond not later than the 15th school day after the date of the request is received. The LEA must give the parent a prior written notice stating whether it is agreeing or refusing to evaluate their child, along with a copy of the Notice of Procedural Safeguards. If the LEA agrees with the evaluation request, it should provide the parent the opportunity to give written consent for the initial evaluation. If the LEA refuses to evaluate the student, the prior written notice must provide reasons for the decision. The requirements of a prior written notice can be found in the legal framework for the Child-Centered Special Education Process Prior Written Notice Framework. The resource for the legal framework website can be located at the end of this session. A parent request for special education evaluation may be made verbally and is not required to be in writing. A verbal request does not require the LEA to respond within the 15 school day timeline as with written requests. However, it is best practice to do so for consistency and to ensure that the parent concern is addressed promptly. The TEA, Technical Assistance for Child Find and Evaluation, recommends this best practice tip for working with families. When a parent makes a verbal request to any district staff for a special education evaluation, it is recommended to ask the parent to put the request in writing with a date and signature and promptly give this written request to the designated administrator. The LEA then must respond to the request no later than 15 school days from the date the written request is received. It is important for each LEA to include in its operating procedures how to address verbal requests for evaluation and requests by campus or district staff, including timelines for obtaining consent. Having these procedures in your operating procedures and training all district staff to follow these expectations will assure that your LEA is in compliance with federal and state regulations and evaluating students suspected of having an educational disability condition and requiring special education services in a timely manner. The Texas Education Code also addresses specific requirements regarding referrals or requests for Section 504 or special education evaluations for students who are homeless or in substitute care. In Texas, the Child Protective Services, or CPS Division of the Department of Family and Protective Services and the Texas Education Code use the term substitute care to refer to all children who are in the legal custody of CPS, including children who are placed either with a relative or in a licensed foster placement. In these instances, the LEA must also provide notice to the person designated to make educational decisions on behalf of the child as well as the child's caseworker. We've reviewed a description of the referral process for an initial evaluation and explored the federal and state regulations and recommended best practice regarding initial referrals. Using this as our foundation and building upon it with guidance from the legal framework on operating procedures for a referral for possible special education services, let's now outline some important considerations for your LEA in developing or revising your procedures for receiving referrals or requests for initial evaluations. It is important to recognize that a referral for special education evaluation is a process that should be clearly and simply detailed in writing in your LEA's operating procedures. This process should outline the steps for LEA response to an initial referral request from parents, legal guardians, school staff, or other designated persons. There are some important points to consider as you create or update your LEA operating procedures addressing referrals for possible special education services. Do staff and parents know who to contact regarding a referral? Is there a specific staff member designated to handle each step of the referral process? And are teachers and parents informed of these contacts? Does your LEA process indicate what data will be reviewed as part of the referral or request for evaluation, and how this is considered in determining the need for proceeding with an FIIE? Does your process specify a time frame for responding to staff and parent requests for evaluation, and what measures are in place to ensure all personnel receive training regarding these timelines? Does your LEA's process make parents and staff aware of the possible outcomes in response to a request for evaluation? We will explore these points in more detail as we move through the presentation. For this first consideration, recall the state and federal regulations we reviewed in the first part of this training. What are some key words or phrases that came to mind? Are these referenced in your LEA special education operating procedures for referral for possible special education services? Additional considerations include, are all LEA staff aware of their child find duty and what this entails, particularly for students with disabilities, including those who are homeless, in foster care, incarcerated, highly mobile or migrant, and military connected? Are the LEA's procedures for initial referrals and requests current and in writing? Do school staff know where to access these procedures? Here are some best practice recommendations to help ensure your LEA's identification procedures are compliant with the federal and state regulations. It is important to designate a district and campus contact who have knowledge of current regulations and can advise staff and answer parent questions about referring a student for a special education evaluation. LEA should review existing operating procedures to make sure they are updated to align with current federal and state regulations, as well as develop a process for revising these procedures when changes in special education regulations are made, as well as update due to more efficient system or staff needs. In other words, continuous improvements. A key practice for LEAs is to provide training each year to ensure all staff are informed of their child find responsibility. As we discussed earlier in this presentation, state regulations indicate that prior to referral, students experiencing difficulty in the general classroom should be considered for all support services available to all students. Therefore, it is important for your LEA operating procedures to include a description of your multi-tiered systems of support, including response to intervention, used to address student needs. These should include the steps the LEA takes to ensure that referring a student suspected of having a disability is not delayed due to a lack of interventions. The TEA's Tiered Interventions Using Evidence-Based Research, or TIER, Statewide Technical Assistance Network, is a great resource to learn more about MTSS. According to the TEA Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Question and Answer webinar, the best practice for an MTSS system should include universal screening, evidence-based practices done with fidelity, progress monitoring, and data-based decision-making. Well-functioning MTSS practices should have high-quality Tier 1, which includes research-based curriculum, includes all students, English learners, special education, gifted and talented, etc., small groups, differentiation, scaffolding, and accommodations. Tiers 2 and 3 should use evidence-based intervention and supplement Tier 1. Fidelity of MTSS implementation is critical throughout Tiers 1, 2, and 3. It is important to remember that although state regulations indicated that students experiencing difficulty in the general classroom should be considered for all support services available to all students, it does not state that the student must receive these supports prior to evaluation. LEAs should not require students suspected of having a disability and requiring special education services to receive interventions for a specific time period or progress through a certain number of tiered interventions before referring for an initial evaluation. As we discussed earlier in this presentation, a referral for an initial evaluation can be made by a student's parent or legal guardian, school staff, or other person involved in the education or care of the student. While a time frame for responding to parent written requests for evaluation is the only one specified in regulations, it is best practice to respond to referral requests from each of these sources within a reasonable time frame so there is not a delay in providing an initial evaluation to any student suspected of having a disability condition. Here are some important questions to consider as you detail the steps for addressing initial referral requests in your LEA operating procedures. If any staff member in your LEA receives a parent written or verbal request for an evaluation, do they know what to do next? How should the request for referral be documented? Who is the campus or district staff member that needs to be informed of the request? What is the time frame for notifying the designated staff person of the request? This notification should be made promptly to allow sufficient time for the request to be reviewed and a response given to the parent not longer than 15 school days from the date the request is received. What does this designated staff member do when learning of the request for an evaluation? Is there a campus team charged with reviewing the request in light of student data? How soon should this team meet after the request is received by the LEA? What is the timeline for responding to the parent request, and which staff member is responsible for replying? Notifying designated staff member of the FIIE request should be made promptly and each step of the process followed quickly to allow sufficient time for the request to be reviewed and a response given to a parent not longer than 15 school days from the date the request is received. These are some important points to consider when developing or reviewing your process for initiating a referral for a special education evaluation. Does your LEA's process for receiving initial referral requests include a dedicated team to review student data? Do your LEA procedures contain a description of the multiple sources of data reviewed to determine the need to proceed with an evaluation? Once you have gathered all of this data, what is your LEA process for analyzing this information to determine if an evaluation is necessary? It is important to designate a campus team to review referrals and make decisions regarding the need for evaluation. It is best practice to have an evaluation staff member, such as a licensed specialist in school psychology or LSSP, or educational diagnostician to serve on this team, since these professionals are highly trained and have expertise in the area of special education evaluation and educational disability conditions. Sources of student data that are important to consider include report card grades, conduct and discipline information, curriculum-based assessments such as local benchmarks, statewide assessment results, progress in response to intervention, and current information from the child's teacher or teachers and parents. TEA Technical Assistance Child Find and Evaluation advises LEAs to gather and systematically analyze information about students. This document also reminds LEAs to consider tiered interventions, evaluation for services and/or accommodations under Section 504, and special education evaluation simultaneously, rather than a sequential manner. It is recommended that LEAs establish a procedure for analyzing data to guide the campus team in determining whether or not to move forward with an initial evaluation. We'll explore one possible tool for analyzing student data on the next slide. Here is a tool developed by the TEA Child Find Evaluation and Art Supports Network that is available for you to use when reviewing and analyzing student data to determine progress and the need for a referral for special education evaluation. The Student Data Review Guide addresses 20 different areas with input from teachers and parents, looking at grades over time, district benchmarks, STAR results and comparison data, interventions including type, fidelity, and progress monitoring, accommodations, attendance, discipline, school changes, retention or summer school, second language, prior assessments, physical health, outside evaluations, and other at-risk factors. It is intended for campus teams to use this guide for data gathering. A supplement to the Student Data Review Guide, guidelines when considering an initial referral for special education for English learners, may be used by culturally and linguistically diverse review teams to ensure a variety of data gathering strategies and tools are considered when an English learner demonstrates difficulties in the educational setting. The form will also assist the culturally and linguistically diverse review teams as they gather data to see if identified difficulties appear to be associated with second language acquisition, language difference, or if the difficulties require a referral to special education. You can access these resources on the TEA Child Find Evaluation and Art Supports website. Since LEAs are legally required to respond to a parent written request for an FIIE within 15 school days from the date this request is received, it is imperative that all LEA staff are provided with annual training on the current LEA process for receiving parent requests and referrals for evaluation. This will facilitate consistency across your LEA in addressing parent requests for special education, ensure LEA compliance with state and federal law, and guarantee prompt evaluation when a disability condition requiring special education services is suspected. It is very important for LEAs to consider training all staff every year on the federal and state regulations related to addressing parent requests for evaluation, including the timeline and required documentation for both written and verbal requests. One important consideration is making sure your LEA's operating procedures include how school staff should respond to parent verbal requests for an evaluation. It is also key to establish procedures designating specific staff roles to create, update, and implement the training, as well as develop a method to document the completion of this training annually for all district personnel. Although legally, an LEA must respond to all parent requests for evaluation, there is no timeline specified for verbal requests. The TEA Technical Assistance for Child Find and Evaluation offers the best practice tip of LEAs addressing verbal requests by assisting the parent with putting their request into writing and then following the legal regulations for parent written requests for evaluation. When developing or revising your LEA's procedures, it is important to specify which staff member or members are responsible for developing, updating, and implementing annual staff training, as well as the method for documenting this training to support the action your district is taking to assure compliance. It is best practice for school personnel with extensive knowledge and understanding of the legal requirements and current special education regulations related to initial referrals and parent requests for evaluation to be involved in the creation and implementation of this training. Special education administrators, evaluation professionals such as educational diagnosticians, LSSPs, or speech language pathologists, and your LEA legal counsel are examples of staff well suited to design and/or deliver this training. As noted during our review of state legal guidelines surrounding FIIE referral, LEAs are required by state law and regulation to distribute annually the Right to Information Concerning Special Education and Education of Students with Learning Difficulties statement, informing parents of their right to request a special education evaluation at any time. The LEA may include the statement in the student handbook or may disseminate the statement through a letter or newsletter to each parent and ensure that each parent receives a copy. Do you and all the LEA staff know the key points contained in these documents? And how are they distributed to parents each year? Are all the LEA staff aware of the district referral process and know where it can be accessed? This is important so that all LEA staff are informed about local procedures and know where to direct parents when questions regarding an initial special education referral arise. It is also best practice to provide information programs for families regarding your initial referral procedures. If a parent provides an outside evaluation from a physician or other service provider, does your LEA procedure specify how this information should be considered in determining the need for an evaluation? How is the receipt of this evaluation documented? Who is the campus staff member designated to receive outside evaluations, and are all personnel aware of who this is? To ensure timely consideration of outside evaluation reports, it is a good idea to include in your LEA procedures that the date the outside report is received by the school is documented on the report and in the data management system used by your LEA. Best practice is for the school staff with training and expertise that is most closely related to the scope of the outside evaluation to review the report and guide the campus referral team in considering this information. For example, an outside evaluation focused on emotional, social, and behavioral concerns that diagnoses a student with an anxiety disorder should be reviewed by the licensed specialist in school psychology, or LSSP, or school psychologist. A private speech evaluation should be reviewed by the campus speech language pathologist. If the campus professional reviewing the outside evaluation has questions or needs additional information, informed consent should be obtained from the parent to contact the outside provider. The TEA Technical Assistance Guide for Child Find and Evaluation states that outside evaluation or diagnosis provided by a parent, outside therapeutic services or tutoring, and hospitalization are some of the circumstances that may, when combined with other data sources, indicate the need for an evaluation. Since federal regulations mandate that an LEA's Child Find duty includes evaluating all students with disabilities who are enrolled by their parent in private schools located in the school district served by the LEA, it is important to include in your operating procedures how evaluations are scheduled for students placed in private school or homeschool. To ensure the LEAs fulfill their legal obligation to evaluate all students enrolled in private school or attending homeschool within the LEA who are suspected of having a disability and needed special education services, it is important for LEAs to have clear written procedures for scheduling these evaluations. First, LEAs should make sure all staff are informed that students who are homeschooled or attend private school within the LEA are covered under Child Find. This training should identify all of the private schools within your LEA and the LEA campuses closest to each private school. Best practice is for the LEAs to designate a specific LEA staff member to serve as the district contact person for collaborating with private schools and coordinating the evaluation process. As we come to the end of our training, let's review some key takeaways. It is important to clearly identify the LEA staff member who is the district or campus contact person for special education referrals that should be notified whenever an FIIE request is received from parents or staff. Remember that each LEA is legally required to respond to a parent written request for an evaluation within 15 school days from the date it is received by school personnel. At this time, if the LEA agrees to an evaluation, it should provide the parent with a notice of evaluation and the opportunity to give consent. If the LEA does not believe an FIIE is necessary, it must provide the parent a prior written notice detailing data-based reasons supporting this decision. LEAs must also respond to parent verbal requests for an initial evaluation. However, this legally does not have to occur within the 15-day timeline that applies to parent written requests for evaluation. In order to address verbal requests in a timely manner and prevent delay of child find, it is best practice for LEAs to assist the parent with putting the request for evaluation into writing, and then follow the legal guidance regarding parent written requests for an evaluation. It is also important for LEAs to establish a process for reviewing and analyzing multiple sources of data when responding to an initial referral request and determining the need for a special education evaluation. Developing a district-wide process will facilitate consistency in decision-making regarding referrals. This presentation has also noted that LEAs should not delay or deny evaluations for children suspected of having a disability because they have not participated in response to intervention process. Students suspected of having a disability are not required to progress through all tiers of an RTI system before being referred for an evaluation. Finally, it is important for LEAs to provide annual training to district staff regarding federal and state regulations on FIIE referrals and related local procedures to ensure legal compliance, and that all students suspected of having a disability are referred for special education evaluation in a timely manner. We hope you now have a deeper understanding of the legal requirements related to initial referrals, including parent requests and the key considerations for developing your LEA procedures regarding referrals and requests for special education evaluation. We hope that you will carry what you have learned in this session into your practice as an LSSP, educational diagnostician, SLP, or other special education evaluation professional or LEA staff. Resources supporting this training are listed on the following slide. We encourage you to reference these sources and to further expand your knowledge and improve your practice. Here are some important legal and state resources to keep at your fingertips for the most up-to-date information regarding requirements and best practice for receiving referrals and requests for a full individual and initial evaluation. Thank you for spending part of your day to expand your knowledge and understanding of processes addressing a referral for an initial special education evaluation. Our TEA, Child Find Evaluation, and ARD Supports Network team is here to support you. Please reach out to us with any questions or comments.